Well done, Walley. Acompanha Berpakovski, centra. Marca, the finish. And Riga lead.
Hello and welcome to the Latvian Football Podcast, where today we're going to continue our series on Virsliga from the outside, where I sit down to talk with the wonderful and surprising people who enjoy the Latvian Championship, despite not being from Latvia at all. And I am delighted to have a very special guest today, as always, Charlotte Patterson, who is probably the person holding the Guinness World Record for the largest amount of books about football read and possibly owned, and is doing wonderful things on social media to promote, well, non-mainstream football, let's put it that way. Is that a fair description of you, Charlotte? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very kind description, definitely. No, thank you very much for asking me on.
So you are from Sunderland, Durham? Which of those?
Yeah, so I live in Durham, but I'm a Sunderland fan for my sins. It's not always been the easiest supporting them, but that's been my team for my whole life. So
Right. So then we have a bit of a conundrum because having lived in Newcastle for a fair few years, I've been conditioned to not like Sunderland, despite not knowing why, but that was the general atmosphere. But I think we'll get past that. You follow a number of non-mainstream leagues, Virsliga being one of them, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that those of us who follow you are aware of. And you've actually managed to visit Riga and not just Riga, actually, last summer and attend a few games. Unfortunately, it didn't come out that we could meet during your visit. But how did you discover these leagues? How did you discover Virsliga? How do you follow it?
yeah, so for the last few years, I've always had quite an interest in sort of niche, non-mainstream football leagues. I think particularly with how modern football is these days, especially in the likes of the Premier League, where it is very money orientated. So it kind of became a bit sort of dissociated with sort of modern football and tried to branch out and just watch football where there's a good sort of community spirit, really. Given sort of teams and leagues a chance where they haven't got these star players, but maybe are doing something really unprecedented within their divisions that they're in. So I've always had a keen interest in various leagues, across the world, not just sort of your lesser known European leagues. I have quite an interest in Asian football leagues, which just stems from my interest in sort of, started off with sort of Chinese history and culture, and then branched off into Japan, and then just all of Asia. So with already being a football fan, just kind of put my two loves together. But no, I've always been really interested in football that takes place, as I said, outside of your sort of so-called top divisions. And I think it was around this time last year, I post out what football podcasts that I listen to, because I love listening to ones that cover, leagues or national teams from different places. And I think it was yourselves that only maybe just started up or had been going for a little while, and you'd commented underneath and said, oh, well, we've got this Latvian football podcast. So it was kind of from there that I took an interest and started listening. And then fortunately for us here in the UK, the Virsliga had games shown on the One Football app and website. So I was able to sort of, when I could, watch some of the football games. And it just kind of came from there. And I could see, I love to travel, especially to go and watch football. And I thought, that I could get a really cheap flight from Newcastle to Riga. And I just decided I'm going to go for a weekend in Burkett, saw what games were happening there. And it was just an amazing few days away.
Oh, cheap flights from Newcastle to Riga weren't a thing when I lived there, unfortunately. So I remember I had to fly via Copenhagen or Amsterdam. Well, we're happy to take the blame for introducing you to Virsliga in whatever indirect way that we have. So that's fantastic. And then, so football is sort of like, at least from what I hear, kind of like almost a medium or a window into different cultures for you. It's like this cultural gateway almost, right?
Yeah, as you say, it kind of gives you that connection to sort of communities, the people that are around it. And I found, during my time in Riga, and, I don't want to make a sweeping generalization because I was only there for a few days, but in the time that I was there, the not just, football supporters, but just the people there were really helpful, really kind, really happy to talk to me. And yeah, it just gives you that insight. Naturally, I've never been to Latvia before or to Riga. And yeah, I mean, football, as you say, it's a kind of a way to link those two together, a bit of a branch into it. And, for a lot of people who tend to look at other leagues and find football teams, or at least certainly in my case, I end up sort of in a rabbit hole, really looking up loads of different things. What other teams are in that area, where they based, what's the history, what players have played for them. So as you say, it is a window into sort of these places to kind of get an idea of the people that surround it.
So not to promote cultural generalizations, but then what have you surmised of the Latvian people from our football?
Yeah, as I said, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations because, of course, I was only there for 3 days. But in that time, as I said, everybody was incredibly kind. When I went to the football matches, there was quite a few people who came over to talk to me, and they were saying, well, once they heard that I was speaking English, asking where I'd come from, why I was here. Quite a few of them very surprised that I would fly to Latvia to go and watch football. But we're quite had a lot of pride about that there was people who would be willing to fly and come and watch their leagues or their teams. So yeah, it was just a really enjoyable experience. As I said, some of the supporters and crowds that I sat with and spoke to, just really kind, and yeah, just giving me a lot of detail, a little bit of back and forth, them asking me questions about football in England and me asking them questions about football in Latvia.
I remember at the time while you were visiting, someone on your Twitter profile, I think, was asking whether you're not worried / concerned / afraid going to these football games by yourself, being a woman.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you always consider. I do my research before I visit certain places. Particularly if I've been going to countries I've never been to before. But it's just kind of the general safety nets that you would put in place. That I didn't really go anywhere that was late at night, and that isn't to say that there's horrendous crime rates or anything in Riga, but you just don't want to. I mean, I wouldn't do the same here. If I was in Newcastle city centre, I would try to avoid it where possible late at night. But yeah, I mean, as I said, yeah, like anywhere you go, there's always that little bit of a concern, but there really wasn't. And I spent quite a lot of time traveling, to and from games. I was really enjoying because you have what's called Bolt, which is very much kind of like an Uber, and again, I'm getting into these taxis, no concerns. Loved the little scooters as well. I remember taking in a football match. I think it was RFS's reserve side, and they were playing a game. I think is it LNK Sports Park that they play at.
Yeah.
And I saw that there was a Bolt scooter there, and I decided to rent it, hire it out, and rode it all the way back to my hotel, which was really enjoyable because the sun was setting over Riga. I was right by the river, and it was just really tranquil. But yeah, the whole time that I was there, I was never sort of concerned for my safety. As I said, a lot of people just go about their business as they whether they were at work or just going about the day. And anybody that I did speak to was really friendly.
Yeah, I mean, for us, that was a little bit eyebrow raising to read that because, the way we see it, it's more of like a family day out kind of an activity rather than Green Street hooligans kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
so it is wonderful that was your experience as well. And yeah, scooters are great. That's how I get to the games. I take one from the train station or the tram station and whatever, and I just scoot off to the stadium. It's wonderful. If you, given your experience of following all these different leagues around the world and different cultures. What would you maybe say Virsliga resembles the most to you?
It's quite a hard one because, as I said, I try my hardest when I can get away to take in different leagues and divisions. I think that it's always very different, watching something online as opposed to going in person and getting a real feel for it. I'd that same year that I'd gone to visit Riga in Latvia, I'd gone to Luxembourg as well to take in their football. And I was hoping actually towards the end of last year about going to Poland, watching the Ekstraklasa. But it just didn't work out. So it is hard to sort of say where the Latvian sort of high league would rank in terms of other leagues that are around, but I was quite impressed with sort of the performances that were on display. Even I took in two sort of second division games. I think one was JDFS Albert. Apologies if my pronunciation's off there. And that was against Riga's sort of reserve side. I was really impressed with that. And then it was RFS's reserve side against, is it Grobenas?
Yeah, the newly promoted side that will be in Virsliga next season.
Yeah, so again, sort of the entertainment that was on display was really good. Really impressed, but with not attending games in other countries and other leagues, it's quite hard to sort of say where I would compare it to in terms of other football leagues in Europe. But I think for those who haven't watched it before, I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised by sort of the quality and entertainment that's on. I know for when you had Ben on the other week for the podcast, I was listening, and he was talking about how it's always very entertaining, very rare that you will have a 0-0 draw or teams not both teams not scoring. They are quite high end thrilling games. I mean, we see that in the league now. I think is it RFS is nearly at 100 goals that they've scored. So you definitely get sort of the entertainment value by going to these games and watching these leagues. And yeah, it's as I say, it's hard to sort of compare it to other leagues in Europe without watching sort of in person too many of the other ones. But I was quite surprised by the quality that was on display.
Yeah, fair enough. RFS, I just checked, clocked 96 goals last season, whilst conceding only like 18 or something like that, which is incredible, completely mind-blowing. And they didn't even get the top score while doing so.
Yeah,
it's interesting that you say that, because this idea that, well, it's much more competitive than it looks is something that pretty much every new foreign coach who takes over a Virsliga team, and is then they have these first interviews during the press conferences where local journalists ask them like, well, what do you think, and how does it seem to you? And they always say that people who watch from the outside and maybe sneer a little bit at the level, they're wrong, that it's actually much higher than it seems if you just look at the statistics, where I think on UEFA coefficient RFA is like 30, just under that magic 33 spot, and then some other stat was released earlier today where we're like 46th in Europe, still better than Estonia and Lithuania, by the way. But then they always say that okay, so competitively that's the situation, but then there's always a but, and the but is usually infrastructural. What would be this but to you? What would you say needs maybe work around the competition, around the football in Latvia in general, from your experience, obviously?
Yeah, I think kind of maybe just more so the marketing of the league, the promotion of it, getting it out there. Because, like I mentioned earlier, fortunately for me, I could get a direct flight from Newcastle, where, I'm only on the plane. I think it's an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. I'm sure it cost me, it was a £60 return, so really, really cheap flight to encourage people to go out for the, get a footballing fix for a weekend away in Riga, to come over and just sort of promoting the teams. Because I mean, since yourselves have, done the podcast, I've learned so much more about the league, but it shouldn't be down to just yourselves, as fans and supporters to promote the league. That, they should be doing a lot of that themselves, whether that's setting up sort of an official podcast, or just sort of the interaction, I suppose, on social media. It can't always be about things online, but given how society is these days, that's how a lot of information is spread, by what we see online, and just the interactivity, because I know that RFS and Riga do that quite well, but throughout the whole league, whether it's certain videos that get done and broadcast online, promoting certain players. So I think just, as I said, I think the quality is good. You get quite a lot of players from abroad who come to join the league, which again, encourages the fact that it is a competitive league, and potentially it can act as a branch really for them to move on to another European country. So they can come here and they can perform really well and get a brilliant move elsewhere. But yeah, I think for me it's just more so the promotion of the league itself, all the teams, because as it is a bit of a duopoly with Riga and RFS. There's not too much out there or known about other sides or the second division, and I think just as I say, promoting it, because I was quite surprised when I did go there, and just having chats with some of the drivers, and again they were very shocked that I would be watching football, that I would travel here to watch football, because they were like, well, I think ice hockey is the kind of national sport, and at the time I was visiting, I believe it was the hockey sort of world championship was being held at the time. So there was actually a lot more fans in attendance at some of the games. I remember going to the Riga game, and there was a lot of ice hockey fans who were there who had their jerseys on at the game. I'm trying to remember, I think they were Czech Republic fans, just judging by the colours that they were wearing. So there was potentially a bit more of an influx of fans attending at that time, because they were already there to watch the ice hockey. But I think it's just, for me, it just, as I said, a bit more promotion of the league, what can be expected, just to help people get to know it a bit more, and just so that it gets its deserved plaudits, because it is a really good league.
I completely forgot about that time, but you were visiting, I guess, at some point in late spring, May, I guess, right? And I now completely remember this incredibly entertaining sight of hockey fans visiting like a second or third tier game that was played just before the hockey match and not far from the arena, and almost like rehearsing their chants and stuff there, and wearing these like Heineken bottle costumes, and then just picking a team they would support and then taking pictures with them. It was brilliant. Everyone was so confused, just so funny. You said in the beginning that kind of one thing that's a little bit maybe not turned you off from top level international football, but kind of maybe a little bit dimmed the interest, was just how it became, and I fully agree, how it became so about money and so commercialized and so commodified that the game almost feels like it lost something. It's a bit too plastic, a bit too glossy, and the amounts involved in transactions for those players and those clubs are just, it's not even a serious thing anymore. How can a player cost hundreds of millions of pounds? So what would you, with that in mind, say to someone who is maybe one of these Premier League for life, or someone who likes La Liga and doesn't watch anything else? What would you say to someone like that to kind of open their eyes a little bit to this whole other world, a much larger world of other football out there?
I suppose it's if you are finding yourself similar to me, where it is quite difficult now to watch modern football, because it is very much, as you say, kind of very commercialized and about money. And I suppose the benefit as well is that sort of some of the Latvian league, takes place when the European football leagues, and so that there's that potential, for people who are wanting to get their football fixed, and the Premier League's season's finished, that you can either watch the Virsliga online, or as I said, I can't say it's the case for everywhere in England or elsewhere, but seemingly reasonably cheap flights, even, cheap tickets. And you get there, I think it cost me, what was about £3 for a ticket to watch Riga, which is a top team in the top flight. And I got I was able to have a drink as well watching the game, which is something you can't do here. And that was really cheap as well. So, it's just somewhere for people to go. I mean, the weather was glorious as I was there as well. And as I said, I think you find yourself pleasantly surprised, until you give something a chance, really, and start to learn a bit more of it. And it just becomes more endearing because you know that these are people who aren't getting paid, astronomical fees, potentially in some of the lower divisions that they're likely to work part-time as well as playing football. But that where the players who are on the pitch are playing for the love of the game, not for the money. So I would encourage anybody who is thinking of looking at other football leagues to take in a Virsliga match, whether it, as I said, if it's online, it's free to watch, or trying to make a weekend of it and a trip over, because as well as the football, it's just Riga was a beautiful place. I managed to. I can't remember if it was yourself, but I did get stranded very briefly because I decided before my flight home that I would visit. Is it Olaine?
Olaine,
Is that how
you went to here?
Yeah.
Town just outside of Riga.
Yeah, so it's just outside of Riga, and I was fine getting there. My bolt dropped me off, and then I knew I couldn't take in the full match with my flight. And then I was trying to kept on refreshing the Bolt app, and I ended up being a bit panicky, thinking, oh my goodness, there's nothing coming up. Everybody's not going to come this far to pick me up. But I was very lucky in the end that someone did. I think they'd just come on shift and managed to drop me off. But yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful place for people to visit and make a holiday out of, as well as sort of the football. Obviously, you've got the sort of the old town of Riga. I was next to where my hotel was, Victory Park, which had some beautiful. Well, I was looking for the sakura, like cherry blossom trees, but I don't think it was the time of year for them at that point, but it was still just really beautiful to walk around those lakes. So yeah, just for anybody who wants to get that football fix, as I said, whether it's watching it online or even trying to come over, the tickets are cheap, the atmosphere is really good, there's that community spirit, and as well as taking in all the football, there's lots of sights. Thoroughly enjoyed the food while I was there as well. So yeah, just I think anybody who's as I said, becoming a bit sort of dissatisfied with how modern football is, to try and take in another league where, as I said, it's just playing for the love of the game and nothing else.
Well, there's a little bit of else, but not much, of course. The Robin
Yes.
went to see well, they just got their license for next season's Virsliga, but it took them a little bit of time to raise their annual budget, which is less than what Premier League players get in, I don't know, half a week, I suppose. So there's that. So it's a little bit more, I don't even know how to characterize it, but it's just a bit more authentic, let's put it that way. That it's about football first and career second, maybe like that would be appropriate. Charlotte, given how much you read about football, and I admit I didn't even know that so much is written about football, and then looking at you posting pretty regularly this book and that book that you will read, and I just realize how narrow my worldview is, and which is a little bit embarrassing given that my career is connected to the written word to an extent. Can we get some book recommendations from you, maybe?
Oh yeah, you're putting me on the spot though. Yeah, as I said before, similar to listening to lots of different football podcasts, I love to learn about football from various different countries and leagues. So just anything that kind of piques my interest, I like to read. But again, I kind of like to go for the more obscure and niche ones, really wild stories that you think just couldn't happen but do. So there's one which is called, I think it's Titans of Teardrop Isle by Seth Burkett. And he was a footballer in England, not sort of at your top level, but was contacted, I believe, by somebody in Sri Lanka about joining a football team there. There was, a lot of risks. He was kind of weighing up the options and kind of got there. And, everything that he was kind of told and promised wasn't as it was intended. So it's kind of, his story and journey of being there in Sri Lanka, kind of understanding, the country, its history, things because there'd been civil wars that were there, playing football, being part of these tournaments. So that's a really interesting one. And certainly Up Pohnpei by Paul Watson, who he also runs a podcast called the Sweeper podcast, and that is what they do is cover sort of your more obscure, niche, smaller football leagues that you wouldn't hear of, and some of the stories they tell on there. But it was about his journey. I think it was him and his friend had decided they wanted to be a football manager of a national team. Googled the lowest ranked, team in the world in Pohnpei, I don't believe at the time, or they might not still be, are affiliated to FIFA. So they then went down that rabbit hole of looking for, all these obscure island teams that had never played competitive matches. And yeah, he just decided that he was going to become a manager of a national team, and then, got to Pohnpei, and it was just as you can expect, there was just nothing there, the pitch, the balls, the nets, the team themselves, the players. So again, they're just really interesting sort of niche stories. And I think the last one that I would recommend as well is One Football, No Nets, which is by Justin Walley. And I can't remember the name of the team he goes to manage, but very similar again, where it was a team that wasn't affiliated by FIFA. And he went there, and I believe it was somewhere between Mozambique or South Africa. It was very much a country that was sort of disputed and had a lot of civil war, but just some of the stories he tells in there, as the title says, there was one football and there was no nets. There was the threat of being, shot, that was involved with dictatorships and just everything that seems so far-fetched in sort of Western culture and in the top divisions. It was just possible in this book. So I think for those who, want to read something really obscure with some fascinating and also scary stories, I would definitely recommend that book as well.
And serendipitously, Justin Walley is also a founder of Riga United FC, which is a club that he founded in Riga for foreigners.
Yeah, that's right. Because are they a third division side? Yeah, I know he's just become, I don't know if the technical term is manager, but for the Marshall Islands. He's another one who very much likes kind of his niche, obscure adventures that takes them here, there, and everywhere, of places that people hadn't heard of. And I just love it because it's given these places sort of the ability to play football and promoting them and doing what they can to try and help that infrastructure. Just brilliant work. And yeah, the book was just fascinating to read.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Charlotte, are you ready for a quick lightning round?
I will certainly try. Whether it'll be quick, I'm not too sure, but I'll give it a go.
Let's try to do quick answers, first thing that comes to mind. But as I told Ben on the last episode, the world, I appreciate, is not black or white. So you do get a sentence to explain yourself if you feel the need to. So let's go. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Print or digital?
Print.
Watching live or broadcasts?
Watching live.
Champions League or European Super League?
Champions League.
Fan-owned or sugar daddy-owned?
Fan-owned.
Do you have a favorite Virsliga team?
I would probably say Riga. It was Skånska Riga before they sort of discontinued. But yeah, I would say Riga. I mean, I did buy merchandise and go to their games, and they're the ones that I look out for the fixtures. So yeah, I would say Riga.
And it's a very, very generous way to say went bankrupt, discontinued. I like that. National leagues or a unified Baltic League?
Oh, now that is a tough one that I don't think I can give you a one-word answer for. Yeah, because it's hard because you would want them to, just to have a Latvian league. But I know there has been, talks about merging with the Estonian Football League and Lithuanian as well. I don't know, maybe because of the fact that I was talking about, marketing and promotion before, that if the leagues were to sort of become a united one, that it would, increase sort of people's interest there. It may well improve the football as well, because it would be more competitive, particularly with, as I said, it's mainly a duopoly between Riga and RFS, with the occasional team sort of challenging them. But it'd be interesting to see how they come up against, the likes of Flora Tallinn in Estonia. And I think it might improve the quality. I suppose my worry would be, as we touched on before, that it would become quite commercialized and, again, money orientated. So I think it would be beneficial to do it, but it's to do it in a way that's still that kind of community focus of the teams, without it kind of getting a bit silly as some of the European other leagues like the Premier League are at the moment. So sorry, not a quick answer, but I think a kind of unified league would be quite good if it was done correctly.
I think you summarize our hopes and concerns perfectly with this one. Okay, and last one, which is probably a bit cheeky, and I'm sure I know the answer to, but Stadium of Light or St. James Park?
Stadium of Light, definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Charlotte. Thank you for taking the time and to talk to us all about Virsliga and your experience in visiting. And I genuinely hope to see you again here. Well, to see you, for you to visit again. And just thank you for following us and Latvian football.
No, thank you very much for having me on, and thank you for introducing me to Latvian football, because I feel like if it wasn't for your podcast, I would never have come across it, and certainly wouldn't have flown across to go and watch the league. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm going to maybe try and come back again this year at some point.